Well, the Republican Congress is going to extend them some tax cuts, and they're also going to cut some. Oh, never mind that part. This is Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, I just saw an article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about how confident everybody is that they're going to be able to extend the tax cuts that President Trump managed to lead the way in passing back during his first administration. And the way this is being portrayed now, and this is my perception, is that this is a tax cut. When you extend a tax cut, it is a tax cut. Now, the Democrats think of it in terms of when you extend a tax cut, you increase spending. Because a tax cut costs. It's the cost that they focus on because the government is, of course, not getting the money that they would have projected to get because the tax cuts were going to expire. But what you don't see a lot of, Stephen Green, is a lot of Republicans going around banging their chests and crowing about how much spending they're going to cut. And I don't need them to use the phrase in order to pay for the tax cut extension, because I don't believe in that nonsense. But, Steve, I know you are the one who has tried to convince America to embrace the healing power of and. Why can't the Republicans do that right now?
Because Congress, and this is a bipartisan issue, Congress is made up of cowards. And it's been that way for a long time now. And the founders and all their genius set up a brilliant system with the separation of powers. They missed a point. I think it was Madison who talked about one of the ways you keep the balance is that each branch, the executive, the judicial, and the Congress, each branch would be jealous. That was his word, of its powers. And that's great. You know, we're not going to let the executive and the judicial stamp all over us. We control the purse strings. Yeah. And that's the way it's supposed to work. But what Congress discovered, it was a discovery process. It happened over a period of years and decades, really. What Congress discovered was that if they just kind of stopped being jealous of their power, their control of the purse strings, if they gave the executive branch this power, then they could do the popular stuff. And they wouldn't have to take the blame for the unpopular stuff. For instance, nowhere in the Constitution does it say the president is supposed to introduce a budget to Congress. Nowhere. The president doesn't have that power at all. But Congress passed a law. It's been around for I don't know how many decades now, that the president has to produce a budget and then the Congress will work from that. Why? Because they're cowards. If there have to be cuts made, they're going to make that one guy take the blame for it, and then Congress can play Santa Claus and give everything away to everybody. And that's where we are at this point. There is so much discretionary power for the president, for the executive branch to spend. One of the great follows you can go to on X is Oilfield Rando. I have no idea who this guy is, but he's brilliant. He's a former oil field worker in Texas, and now he makes his living on Twitter exposing all of this government waste. And he's also a really funny guy. And you find all of these amazing grants for amazingly stupid things that Congress has no control over. They just kind of gifted the money to the executive branch, and then the various departments hand out all this money, and it's always for progressive left-wing causes, almost always. And the amount, this is where the Doge boys are going to go in and hopefully just start cutting away like crazy. But really, to get out of this mess, Scott, Congress has to be jealous of its powers again. And the way to do that is to elect representatives who aren't cowards. And that's up to us. So I think we have to stop being cowards and start electing brave representatives.
Bill Whittle, we've heard so often that Congress holds the purse strings. I would challenge any member of Congress to produce even one end of that string. I think that it's been a long time since Congress held the purse strings. And in fact, the only thing we hear from Congress is how can we increase the borrowing limit and how can we increase spending? And this is when either party is in charge. Obviously, Democrats want to do it more because they believe that the federal government is the solution to everything. But when the Republicans are in charge,
$33 trillion didn't happen just on the Democrats' watch.
Not been a huge difference. Now, let me ask you your opinion. Steve brought this up, but the Department of Governmental Efficiency, that's really sounds like it's going to be more like a consulting group run by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to help to reconfigure, restructure, or eliminate or deregulate or whatever it takes to make government more efficient. It's not called the Department of Government less spending. It's just efficiency. So we're assuming less spending. Do you think that any majority in Congress right now has the appetite for real deregulation, real elimination of any government agencies or severe downsizing thereof, or real spending reduction?
I think it's going to be up to the president to make the case. But I'll tell you what I do think. I think it would be easier, just to take one example, I think it would be easier to eliminate the Department of Education than to get a 25% cut in the budget of the Department of Education.
Wow. Yeah.
That's what I think. I think that these institutions are so ossified. The immortal bureaucracy, the protecting the iron rice bowl, is that the only way to make any effective cuts is to simply go in there and chop off limbs and not try to prune all the little twigs, to some degree. You just go in there with an axe and just start cutting. This is why we did a show on this several weeks ago, why I was so impressed with Elon Musk's suggestion that we take the members of these federal bureaucracies and offer to pay them for 2 years at their full salary. I thought, my God, that's about the only thing you could do to dislodge these people whose I had my mouth open to say greed, but to be fair, this is their livelihood.
Yeah.
I mean, this is their jobs. It's how they feed their families. So if you're going to get rid of entire sections of the government wholesale, you have to be prepared. And I am not only prepared, I am delighted. If it takes 5 years of full salary to eliminate a department of government, okay, that is a net gain for everybody. You're still paying for it, but you get the benefits of not having the regulations and all the rest of that nonsense immediately. When Donald Trump was elected, he was elected on a series of promises, and people concentrate on the largest mass deportation in history, and everybody's talked about how difficult that is going to be to accomplish, and it is going to be difficult to accomplish. But I think it pales in comparison in difficulty with going in and cutting federal spending. But I'll bet you anything that regardless of what the actual outcome will be, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are going to find that we are spending twice as much as we need to for this government. I'd be willing to bet you that they will be able to find 50% of the government costs that we are paying right now to be unnecessary. And I think that's the minimum number. I suspect that what we would find would be something closer to the numbers that Elon Musk discovered when he went into Twitter, which was namely 90% of the people who were working there didn't do anything, or certainly didn't do anything that couldn't be done by a harder working 10% of the workforce. So this is going to be the challenge. But I'll tell you something, Scott, I heard out of Donald Trump's mouth, unprompted, talk about starting to pay down the debt, and I have for years considered that to be a physical impossibility, just off the table impossibility. It's just a question of waiting till the collapse occurs. If he can sell to the American people that, I don't know what the numbers are now, but let's just say for the sake of the argument, that 30 cents on every dollar that you pay for in taxes doesn't buy you any government or any infrastructure. It just goes to service the debt, and that number gets bigger every year. Then he has a chance to go in there and start chopping up the bureaucracy, and that would make him one of the 5 greatest presidents of all time.
Bill, I think this number is right with the interest payments now being over $1 trillion a year. That money we got nothing for it except for paying off the debts we've run up, or excuse me, paying the interest on the debts we've run up. Yeah,
on the debts.
Is about equal to the payroll taxes that pay for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Yeah.
So we're paying for 2 governments, and we're getting one.
One really bad one.
So I won't be surprised if you're right about that, Bill, but I suspect it's going to be different than anybody imagines, because I think the magic of what Elon Musk did at Twitter, for example, was to go in there and basically clean house first and then figure out what he needed to run the company. And so he was able to drastically reduce staffing. And he is, as he would say, when he does manufacturing or when he does staffing, whatever he does, he basically has one word going through his mind, which is delete, delete, delete. And so when you're manufacturing, you want to delete the number of steps in a process. You want to delete the number of parts in an item. And so he goes with that mindset. You're correct. I think it'd be easier to remove the entire Department of Education and basically say, Department of Education does not exist right now. Then try to figure out what elements of the federal involvement in education are actually essential, can't be done at the local level, and can't be done at the state level. And build from there. But you would find, if you had a constitutional mindset, that there are no elements of that, because we didn't used to have a Department of Education at the federal level. We added that on afterward. And so years ago, I think it was in a book that former Senator Pat Toomey wrote, where he talked about once he became a senator, or maybe when he was in Congress, he had people come into his office, and he was stunned at how many people passionately came to his office arguing for the continuation or the expansion of some particular program because their livelihood depended upon it. But he never had any individual taxpayer coming to his office arguing for any particular spending cut or anything like that, because when you spread out the spending over the great mass of taxpayers, no particular thing costs anybody very much. So when I was in government, we would have the administrator of the county who would come to us and say, this only costs a couple of pennies for each taxpayer to have this kind of important program each year. Well, how can you argue against a couple of pennies? But that's what a budget is made of. It's made of a couple of pennies here and a couple of pennies there, and next thing you know, it adds up to trillions of dollars. And so it becomes really difficult to make the case to incrementally make things more efficient without actually starting out by deleting and then doing what another thing we tried to do in local government was to get the government to adopt a zero-based budgeting plan, which meant that each year they wouldn't start with last year's budget. They would start with the fundamentals, in this case, the U.S. Constitution. They would say, okay, what is absolutely required of us to provide, and what is the most efficient, effective, minimal way we can do this, and build it from the ground up each time instead of building upon what has been accreted over the course of 2 centuries plus. And so I am not hopeful that Republicans in Congress are going to be motivated to do any serious budget cutting, but I'm not really even looking for budget cutting. I am looking for constitutional reorganization of the federal government. The money takes care of itself if you start to go back and focus and say, okay, what are we really supposed to be doing? Every business has to do this from time to time. Every business has to sit down, and they typically go on a retreat somewhere with their top executives, and they go, okay, what's going on with this company? How did we suddenly become this massive thing that's in all these different areas, half of which aren't succeeding? And you got to sit down and get back to fundamentals, get back to basics. And, some cases you spin things off, and in other cases you completely eliminate things so you can get back to the core of your business. I would love to see the United States government get back to the core of its business. By definition, that's going to be a less expensive form of governance. But if you go in crying out that we need to cut spending, well, you're always goring somebody's ox there. And that gets really hard to sell. But if you go in saying, look, it's about time we had a reevaluation of the work that we're doing here. We need to reanalyze whether we're covering the fundamentals effectively and efficiently, and have we gotten off into areas that we shouldn't be at all, and therefore we can remove ourselves from those areas. I am hopeful that the Department of Government Efficiency will come up with some of those. The one thing that we would say at the local government level when we were trying to get the county executive to cut spending and reduce the tax rate was basically we had one power. We could send the budget back to the county executive and say, you can't go beyond this tax rate. You figure it out. And if they do that, if Congress does that to President Trump and says, here's how much money you have to spend, you figure it out, I think because of some of the people that he's surrounding himself with, we will find ourselves with a more effective, more efficient, more constitutional form of government. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.